Hello, good night to you and to all the members of the loyal opposition. And I was listening to you, and actually something happened there. I'm not sure what it was. As you were talking about Marcus Garvey, I didn't want to go on my computer. I didn't want to run the risk of cutting myself off. And I went on my tablet and I pulled up my certificate. You remember my certificate that I
Yes,
inherited from my grandfather, and it appeared on the
right.
screen. Like I don't know if I was trying to send it to myself, but um, no, I think that a lot of people oh, there is, and I don't know how it got on the screen today, but there it was, and so up you mighty lady, because and this Marcia and members of the loyal opposition is a prized possession of mine. My grandfather, and if my father were alive, he would have been 100 and something years old because my father was born in 1916. So that tells you something. This was a share $5 back in. If Dave scroll down a little further, I don't. Sorry, Marcia. I am still amazed how I got it on here because I was trying to send it. But anyway, this is 1921. On the 10th day of September 1921, this share certificate was issued to my grandfather. And so when you talk about Marcus Garvey, I never met my granddad. My grandfather, both my mother's father and my father's father, this is my paternal grandfather, were dead before he was born.
Mm-hmm.
But this told me something about David McClean. He was a Pan-Africanist, and I believe he would have stood in the park to listen to Marcus Garvey when he spoke to Barbadians.
Mm-hmm.
And he was moved to do this. And every time I look at this, I am reminded that we in Barbados, the leaders and the Caribbean and Africa, because he was, if you look at the black star in the
Yes.
flag of Ghana, that was Kwame Nkrumah was inspired by
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Garvey and other African leaders, and so this is his philosophy, his thinking, the strategies that he put forward are things that I see returning now. And
Mm.
I challenge the current Caribbean leaders and African leaders to fulfill his dream because about about the issue that we dealt that you were dealing with and that some of us were on the road yesterday, which, as you said, I think has pushed the prime minister to
Can
act.
I
And I
say, Miss McClean, it was really, really wonderful. I don't want to break this. We will go
no,
back
go
to
ahead.
that.
We can
Just
come
want
back
to
to
say,
this because I
no,
want to talk
no,
about
no. I
yesterday.
don't know. I just want to quickly say, and I want you to go back to your story here, to say that it was really wonderful to see you out there, and I wasn't surprised because as you talk about your grandfather, and if Dave could put that back on the screen, you are the kind of person, and I tell people all the time this about you, that you stand on principles. That's the Maxine McClean I know. And it is a privilege to know you, ma'am. It really is. And you might not people every a lot of people they watch you, and I think they see that, they see the class and the grace and how principled you are. And so and I think it's coming from a history like this, and there you were in your white shirt out there, But back to your story about
Yeah, no, but
Marcus
I
Garvey.
want, no, as I was saying, this to me, and I want to bring it to today, and I want to link it with what we were talking about because there's a connection with all of these things. We have a political class across the Caribbean, and I'm going to come straight to Barbados.
Yes.
The Prime Minister of Barbados, for example, is revered in many African countries. If you talk to Ghanaians who would have seen her, or South African who might have seen her, or somebody in Ethiopia where she might have gone to the head, the organization at the AU, the African Union, and spoken there or at the United Nations. You know, they talk of Barbadian prime minister who is challenging the developing world and who is championing climate change and small island developing states. Of course, these are all things that go back to the 90s when we talk about climate change, etc., where Barbados and was taking the lead. And if you go to the 90s, you're talking about the former prime minister, Mr. Erskine Sandiford, later Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, and so on. But the point I'm making is we hear all of this talk, but on the ground, when we look at what is happening economically and how we view our political opponents. I listened in part as I was getting ready to come on the show. I was listening to you and your guest from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but I was also listening to some of what the Prime Minister said because I was anxious to hear what she had to say in relation to this piece of legislation, and I will come to this. Now, the Prime Minister has gone to Africa. She's gone around the world talking about small island developing states and giving us a chance and all of these things. My question to the Honorable Mia Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, what are you doing to empower Black people like my son, my brother's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? I use in my family as an example, the descendants of David McClean, the man who invested all of $5 back in 1921. An economist or somebody who is into numbers can tell me the equivalent of what that is worth today. Mm-hmm. But I want to know what you are doing to empower people like me. You know why I'm asking that? Because I am sitting down and watching young Barbadians.
Yes.
Our young men in particular, because I'm going to stress our young men, because when we talk about crime, we are talking about young men. I saw a photograph circulating today with the allegation that this is a young man who committed suicide. I have not heard anything about it. I have not shared it, but I have received it multiple times. And if that is the case, if it happened, he's not the first one. And so all the talk that I hear, what are you doing to empower our young Black men and our young women? Because I put the men first because the women are the ones who are benefiting the majority in our educational system. They're the ones who become I just saw a graduating class of young doctors. And I was trying to count the young men in there because we know traditionally that used to be dominated by men. And I'm happy to see all the young women. But as the mother of a son, you're the mother of 3 sons.
Yes.
And as the parents of boys and young men, we have to be concerned that while our sons may get the push because of their family situation and so on, the guidance that they get from their parents, there are many young men out there who are adrift. There are also many young men who are not adrift, but who are very frustrated because when they look around, if it is in construction, we are not seeing, for the most part, traditional methods of constructing houses by government, which used to be a major player in home construction. We are not seeing young entrepreneurs who have great ideas, who are technologically savvy, etc.
Yes.
Getting the opportunity. But what we're getting is an increase in crime. Because at the end of the day, I suppose what a lot of the young men are saying, because they're the ones who are committing crime for the most part, they are out there saying, what else is there for me to do? Go and sell some drugs, go and rob somebody. A lot of us grew up with very little. I certainly did. And I didn't see my neighbors robbing people, etc. But at the same time, I would say this, the condition of the majority of people in the places that I went in terms of your neighborhood, they were like yourself.
Yes.
But what we have now is a situation where somebody can spend $15,000 for an all year's night get together. They pay that for a cabana or whatever, or a VIP something at something. So when you see that kind of thing happening, and I hear people come, and I certainly tonight I listened to the Prime Minister trying to explain, but as they say, to explain is to expose the madness that was captured in that legislation. Come and explain to me how the majority of people are getting an opportunity. Come and explain to me why it is that a promise, and we didn't hear, and you would remember that I've said on this show more than once, we didn't hear the Prime Minister's voice when there were promises about transferring the sugar industry to a cooperative, and the cooperative, if consistent with the credit union movement, which is the biggest element of the cooperative movement in Barbados, is on like people like you and me, and certainly persons not who only look like me, but also the average Barbadian who would have earned much less than I did in my lifetime as a worker, but who, when we pool all their resources together, if they get to control that, it would make a difference. The Prime Minister had said nothing
about
that industry. People have been asking the state of the sugar industry. But you know what? All of a sudden now, when I heard people like Colonel Brown talking about not only the sugar industry, but linking it with energy, renewable energy, and the plans, which in the hands of a movement of over 100,000 people, because if you leverage the membership, you will be doing some of what Marcus Garvey talked about. But instead, what I'm hearing now is that there are plans for battery storage, etc. Who, and my question is, who will get to do that business? Who will get to control that business? You understand? And so I hear all the lip service being paid. And I hear the comments that we're trying to very subtly, because it was interesting to listen to the tone of the Prime Minister. And I have to prophesy.
Talk to us about the tone. Let's go over, because you've listened to, did you listen to all the speech?
No, I could not listen to all because I had to get ready to come on this show. And to be honest,
but let me just say something to the people that when it's finished, we've been promised by
I can
Mr.
share
Corey
some.
Greenidge, we've been promised by Mr. Corey Greenidge that he will join us. And so at any minute, once it's finished, he will come and he will join. But so can you just tell us what?
No, what I can tell you is, and the Prime Minister suggests, well, first of all, she spoke about the role of the president in terms of appointing this special commission or whatever. And I laughed because the bill, when it was presented by the Attorney General who led off the debate on behalf of the government, that was not part of the bill. That was introduced after the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Mr. Ravtarn. The Honorable is usually used in relation to members of cabinet, but I don't want to waste time. When Mr. Ravtarn spoke, he drew to the public's attention that that was a major weakness in the bill. But listening to the Prime Minister tonight, she didn't say, well, the first thing that I opted to change once I listened to the leader of the opposition was to change that as I spoke on the floor of Parliament. But listening to her tonight, if you had just come down from Mars and you were hearing about the bill, you would say, oh, the Prime Minister said, but the president, the head of state, will be appointing these people after that was determined, after Mr. Thorne spoke about it. I got the impression also, and she talked about people marching up and down, but it is the people marching up and down who would have pushed the Prime Minister and her cabinet and parliamentary colleagues to act. Because she mentioned, and if Mr. Greenidge will correct this if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, she talked about imported conspiracy theories, but don't worry about that. What she indicated, the exception will be repealed after consultation. Now, these were her words, after consultation with the AG. And she went on to say that the government listens to complaints. And I smiled and I wrote down the word shoddiness. It is not about listening to complaints. Because let me just quickly, while we wait for Mr. Greenidge to come, I haven't listened to all. And I would say this, members of the loyal opposition, while I cannot speak for what happens in government now, I can speak to you about the processes that we followed for 10 years when I was a member of the cabinet. Any piece of legislation, before it can go to Parliament and be debated, first being presented by a member of government and then responded to by the opposition and debated by whoever wants to speak on either side, has to come to cabinet for approval. That it will, and it will be sent forward to Parliament. Of course, in order to come to cabinet, that piece of legislation is drafted within the chambers of one of the agencies within the Attorney General's on the Attorney General purview. That is drafted, but most importantly, it is drafted on the basis of drafting instructions, which would come from the relevant minister. So, for example, something on agriculture would most likely be sent forward by the Minister of Agriculture and so on.
Right.
But it is there are clear drafting instructions. In other words, the legal drafters are told what government wants inside that bill. So even though I go and say, Marcia, you are a legal drafter, we want something on wiretapping, and you decide what? No, you are given instructions. This is what we want inside of the bill. Having drafted, it goes to the Attorney General to scrutinize. I will hope he reads it. Certainly, I know what used to happen when I was part, as I said, of that cabinet. So the Attorney General goes through that, and then the Attorney General signs off and sends it to cabinet. That sign off is saying to the cabinet and to the world, because once it reaches Parliament, the assumption is that it is fit, that it reflects the intentions of government, and that all that he wants and all that cabinet wants to see in there is in there. So when the Prime Minister said that this exception will be taken out before it goes to the Senate, if I understood her correctly, after consulting with the AG, that consultation should have happened before. And because what the concerns expressed by the public and shared on this program, and before that highlighted by Mr. Thorne, those concerns are not some kind of obscure, unexpected reaction. It is a clear and obvious reaction to a situation where traditionally you're saying that we want to have a process that's transparent. You have to have a warrant. But then they make an exception and say, but in some cases, we're not going to have a warrant. Come on. If you have a clear case of what you want to do and you are genuinely pursuing criminals,
yes,
then you understand. But you would have heard me speak on this program. I actually took the time yesterday standing in front of the building of Parliament to explain to those who would listen.
Yes, you did. You took the mic.
What that exception would mean, because that exception, to be honest, would apply more to people like you and me.
Yes.
Because it created a significant loophole. So the point I'm making is when you read section 5.2b, I got it correct, right? 5.2b.
Yes, 5.2b. After yesterday, I think everybody got it. Everybody got it after yesterday.
So when you look at that and you're telling the public, no, you know what? We heard you and we understand your complaint. So I'm going to speak to the Attorney General. He should have read it and understood the dangers and the problems that would create. But no, that was the intention. So I don't understand. One thing, Marcia, I will say this. I hate people to take me for a fool. I am not stupid. And it is an insult to the intelligence of Barbados to say some of the things that I heard the Prime Minister give in terms of this. That should have been, and all it leads me to ask is, the process that I just described, was that process followed in respect of this, and is it a process that is followed by the government before they bring legislation?
Right,
What I
right.
can also tell you is that um, Prime Minister suggested that the immigration bill and the citizenship bill, I guess she's been hearing some rumblings about that, should be made available, as they should, because these are two important pieces of legislation which should be subject to scrutiny by Barbadians. But so I would say to the Prime Minister, you ain't fooling nobody. As I used to say to people, I might have been born a night, but I'm born last night. I've been around a long time, and people, these are serious things, Marcia, that they believe that they could. The reality is, over the last 6 years, prior to the crossing of the floor, Mr. Thorne, I would say that the level of debate, the depth of analysis of bills, because the Prime Minister made reference to the quality of the work of Parliament. Let me see if she talked about informed debate and spoke about the standards in Parliament. And I would say this is somebody who sat there for 10 years. And if anybody goes and does an analysis of the debates, the length of time, the amount of the issues raised on any piece of legislation, the numbers of members of Parliament or members of the Senate who speak on these things, what they say, how they debate it, and so on, would recognize without a shadow of a doubt, and I say this without a fear of contradiction, that the average debate of a bill since this administration has come to office has been very shallow. The level of participation by members of Parliament whose responsibility it would be to help their constituents to understand that the level of participation has been less than adequate in almost all situations. It has changed, and I heard from somebody who said Mr. Thorne came, once he crossed the floor, the level of debate had risen because they had to step up their game. So, Prime Minister Whelan come again when you come to explain this. First of all, she started out by saying, this is not a political speech of any sort. No, please, Prime Minister. If you want to say to me, and this is where we have to use language correctly, you are the head politician as Prime Minister. That's how I describe it. That's my words. You are the head politician. As head politician, what kind of speeches do you give? What is the business of a politician? Politics. What it should not be, and I always, you would know that I always choose my words correctly.
Yes.
If you're saying to me, it is not a partisan political speech, I'm comfortable with that. But you're not coming to give us a lecture. You're not coming to preach to us. You're coming to speak to us as I describe you as the head politician in this country. So you give a political speech. What we want in that political speech is a speech that is factual, that speaks to the realities, that is objective, that is serious, come on, and so to me, right, when I listen to these things, you know, being in Barbados, we have just come through, is 2 weeks, because I think Parliament, almost 2 weeks or a week plus, of discussion arising out of the passage of a piece of legislation in the House of Assembly.
It's actually 10 days because they introduced it, as far as I remember, August 7th.
Right. 10 days, almost 2 weeks. 10 days.
Almost 2 weeks, 10 days.
Of a piece of legislation that you did not deliberately seek to give significant opportunity to speak. In other words, there are things that are sufficiently important that the government can utilize its multiple sources of information dissemination. We have the Government Information Service. We also have a parallel institution that where we have a number of political appointees who function in the same public relations kind of communications space. Well, I hate to use words that are buzzwords, communications arena. And this is something I believe that if you sat around as cabinet, as parliamentary group, you would say, look, you know what, colleagues, as important as it is for us to try to get certain pieces of legislation in place and to tackle crime, because if we see it as a major plank in seeking to address crime, it is also important, given Section 52B, that we talk about it with the public. But you know what? It was not discussed in Parliament. The Attorney General, I sat down and I listened to the Attorney General's speech on this, his introduction of this bill. I listened to every word. I might have lost focus a minute or two, as is human to do. But I listened to the Attorney General and he spoke about warrants. He did not speak to this.
He did not. He did not.
Now, I would ask him the question. Sorry, go ahead, Marcia. You were saying.
No, I was saying that he did not. In fact, what he said amounted to basically what he was saying was that all of the wiretapping or the interception would be done with a warrant, and his colleague, Minister Abrams, came and backed him up. So
Yes.
they said the opposite of what was in the bill that he had in his hand. That's why I kept hammering away to people, to the viewers, and saying that on that particular occasion, those two gentlemen lied to the people of Barbados. And I'm
They
not taking
omitted
it back.
significantly. I heard you mention that you can lie by commission, or
Yes,
by
or
committing
can lie by
or
omission. And it wasn't just that, but they also went and whatever was given to the GIS, because you can't blame the GIS so much because they are writing whatever the minister sent. They also put the lie in the GIS document, and we have to call it what it is. They were in Jamaica. We call you a jinal. You are deceiving the people by leaving a piece of the information. But just continue.
Mr. Abrams stresses that the legislation can only be enacted with a warrant from the highest judicial office in the
What
land.
is
Now,
that?
you see, and this is the problem. Now, I asked the question. There are 29 members of parliament, BLP members of parliament. A significant number of them sit in cabinet, which means that they are party to the approval of what goes to Parliament for debate. As I mentioned earlier, the bills have to go and be approved and signed off to be sent forward to Parliament. That happens in cabinet unless they change the rules. And, the systems don't change. I will hardly think that they have changed. Well, I don't know. Let me put it away. That's what's supposed to happen. Typically, again, because as I said earlier, I can only describe the processes as I understood them. And these processes, this is what I'm going to say now, apply to both political parties over the years, whether they're in government or in opposition. Political parties have, the parliamentary group is really then the bringing together of the members of cabinet and the other persons serving in Parliament, the backbenchers, and the members of the Senate. So you get together as a parliamentary group. In the case, and I think, I believe both of them probably used to meet on Mondays. But typically, Parliament meets on Tuesdays. So in the case of the Democratic Labour Party, we met on Mondays. And that parliamentary group would look at the legislative agenda. They will look at the pieces of legislation, the actual bill with all the provisions, and we will discuss it. We want to make sure people understood, because remember I said the cabinet approves, but then you have to make sure that the other parliamentarians who don't sit in cabinet understand and know what's in there, because they speak to the legislation as well.
Yeah.
So that is the process. So my question, therefore, it says to me based on what the Prime Minister said about hearing the complaints, that she and her 28 colleagues, along with the 12 senators, so that's 29 and 10 is 39, and 1 is 40, 41 persons, 29 and 12 is 41 persons, either sat down and accepted Section 52B and were comfortable with it because they didn't think it would be a concern for the public, and they proceeded with it. And it was seen as not, it's either something, it's either that, they were okay with it, but they probably felt that the public would not be okay with it. Therefore, the Attorney General opted not to speak to it.